do, my woke folk, aka my global citizens, BKA my GCs. I am Pharaoh Musa, host of Stay Woke Podcast. Welcome back to my brand new series, Fafo with Pharaoh. Fuck around and you just might find something out. But before we get started, I'm gonna need you to make it do what it do and hit that follow button. Go on, hit that follow button first, then thumb your way on over to my Stay Woke Podcast on YouTube, WOQUE, and hit that subscribe button. There I have about 38 different videos ranging from climate change, viruses and vaccines, black men and endangered species. So go please, when you have a free time, your copious free time, go cop that, watch those videos, amazing footage and documentary information, interviewing people, and just really informative, because one of the key factors in my podcast or in these series is that I want you, my global citizens, to never be influenced by me, but to always be informed. Let's go. In my last couple clips or few clips, I made two declarations that I'm standing 10 toes down on. Now let me ask a question. And I'm asking this question in a very facetious manner. It's a rhetorical question. Is colorism alive? Or is there such thing as people of color? That would be a no. My declaration today and every day from this day forward is that there is no such thing as color. Colorism is dead. There's no black, there's no white, there's no brown people. And during the course of this series, I'm going to tell you, actually this particular series, I'm going to give you definitive proof on exactly why. My second declaration was one planet, one people, one race. Is the human race divided up into multiple different types of species? That's a no. The human race is one species, but we may have different species on the planet, but the human race is one species, one people, one planet. Now, we are all one color in my idea, and the consensus among scientists, archaeologists, paleontologists, geologists, anthropologists, has always been that the lower levels of vitamin D at higher altitudes where the sun is less intense cause the lightning effect when modern humans who began dark-skinned first migrated north out of Africa. So let's talk about the origin of man, because I think it's important for all of us, my global citizens, all those who have hung on to this idea that I'm a white, brown, or black individual. Now, I'm not trying to discredit your geographic location, your cultural traditions, but I'm trying to say that we've built a society wrapped around a color. But I want to talk to you about the origins of man so that we can really clarify moving forward while I'm deeming all of you who are following me my global citizens. Let's go. So let's start off with an Ashanti phrase from the Ghana tribe. So the Ghana is located here on the western coast of this continent that they call Africa. Right? And the Ashanti tribe or Ashanti Empire existed from 1709 to 1909. During that time, that tribe had a really strong military. They were very wealthy. They used to trade gold and ivory. They had huge architectural structures that they had built. They were known for their clothing and weaving. Actually, the kente cloth comes from them. But they have a phrase or saying that I want to share with you, my woke folk, which is the premise on which I'm basing my current series today on, the origin of man, and why I feel colorism is dead, and that we're one people, one planet, one race. So the saying goes as such: So wower fina wosan kofa Yankee. So wower fina wosan kofa Yankee. So wower fina wosan kofa Yankee. There's nothing wrong with going back to fetch what one has forgotten. My woke folk, we as a human race must go back to the origins of man to move forward as global citizens of this planet. If we don't learn to live together, we will go extinct together. Ask the dinosaurs how that worked out for them. Let's talk about where proof and I feel source base of information should emanate from when one is making very definitive declarations on especially the origins of man. So let me give a shout out first to UNESCO. The United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization is a specialized agency of the United Nations aimed at promoting world peace and security through international cooperation in education, arts, sciences, and culture. Headquarters in France and founded in 1945 in London. The reason why I mention UNESCO because I followed or watched about 30 or 40 hours of historical information on the history of Africa that was narrated by a young lady called Zainab Badawi. Zainab Badawi. Sorry if I butchered your name. I apologize, but you did an amazing job. She was born out of Morocco. But what she did, she looked at the history of Africa from the aspect of the African historians in each of the individual countries. So she went to those individual countries, interviewed the historians, and then I had that footage on video, which I watched, as I said, 30 to 40 hours of. So shout out to Zainab Badawi from UNESCO. The other great source of information I got is from my Black History 365 book. And I want to shout the brothers out, Dr. Walter Milton Jr. and Joel A. Freeman, who contributed to this history of African Americans, or Black history as they want to call it. And I'm even refuting the fact that they use Black as the name, but I understand that traditionally, in order to communicate with people, and if you want them to say, be open to understanding something different than they already have accepted as fact, you have to meet them where they are. I sometimes call that cognitive dissonance, where you've then bought in so much to what you already believe in that anything, even facts, that's contrary to what you believe in, you have a difficult time digesting that. But I digress. So anyway, these brothers really give a great, I feel, historical background on the history of African Americans from when they were enslaved, the transatlantic slave trade, over into America. So what I think ties my understanding, which I want to share with you, my woke folk today, about the origin of man, is that from the history of Africa, based upon UNESCO and Zainab Badawi's 40 hours of the history of Africa from the African perspective, and then the Black history, light reading that these gentlemen provided here with the history of the transatlantic slave trade, and then the history of African Americans here through slavery. Things give me a well-rounded view of what I want to share today in terms of our origin, and still standing on my two declarations that colorism is dead, and that we're one people, one race, and one planet. Let's go. So I think first, before I get into the origins of man, I want to debunk a few, I feel, myths, historical myths. And I think it's important to do so because it gives us a frame of reference. Because I think with just providing facts with no context leaves people with a gaping hole of information or knowledge that they're going to fill in some way. And sometimes that disconnect between what they're filling in and what the facts are confuses the information even more. So these are going to be some trigger warnings from this point on. Trigger warnings! So let you guys know, going forward from this point on, I'm going to try to share with you information that's based on the facts that I show, the sources that I have there, but also do your own homework. I think it's vitally important, just before you comment, to at least go back and check whether or not the source of information I'm providing is viable. So let's talk about the Earth. The Earth has been around about 4.5 billion years, according to geologists, archaeologists, anthropologists. And the Earth, then, in terms of its land mass, I believe was formed about 350 million years ago under the auspices of a point we call Pangea, or people may well know that term as continental drift. So the name Pangea is derived from an ancient Greek word called pan, which means the entire or whole. And Gaia means Mother Earth. So the entire or whole Mother Earth. So the idea is that this landmass was all one mass at one period of time. The concept that the continents was once formed in a continuous landmass was hypothesized and corroborated by evidence by another scholar named Alfred Wegener, who was a European, and he was the originator of this kind of scientific theory of continental drift. I won't say he's the first person that thought of it, but he's the first person that at least documented. So give the brother credit. So Pangea, which is to me, I mean, anyone that looks at the map should be able to notice this, but geographers, once they begin to start to outline, as they travel to these land masses, what it looked like, the first evidence seemed to closely fit that it was remarkable. It seemed that these land masses had already been connected together. And guys, you can see here, listen, if you look at the map here, if you look at South America and you look at Africa, if you push this landmass closer to North and South America, it fits right in almost like a puzzle. Imagine that, right? This is on every map. Check it out and see. This gives some hints, besides the fossil and the DNA evidence, that the land masses were once connected together. And this is key in my proof when I go about the origins of man and how that we've caused, because the land masses have separated a separation in terms of our cultures and races because of color. So, but I digress. So again, the geography of the continents bordering the Atlantic Ocean was the first evidence suggesting the existence of Pangea. The seemingly close fit of the coastlines of North and South America with Europe and Africa was remarked on almost as soon as these coasts were charted. As soon as they looked at it, it was like, they were obvious. Like, it should be obvious to anyone that looks to that. So those who don't believe the land masses were connected together, go pull your maps back out and take a step back and look at if it doesn't look like a puzzle. So according to evidence, the supercontinent was formed approximately 335 million years ago and began to break up apart about 200 million years ago at the end of the Triassic and the beginning of the Jurassic, not Jurassic Park, but the Jurassic era, which Jurassic Park is seemingly named from, in contrast to the present Earth and its distribution of continental mass. Pangea was centered on the equator and surrounded by a super ocean called Panthalassa. So I guess all the oceans, based upon evidence, were really kind of a massive super ocean. It wasn't the Indian Ocean, it wasn't the Atlantic Ocean, it wasn't the Pacific Ocean, because we've now divided that up because the land masses, in a sense, forced that division. Pangea is the most recent supercontinent to have existed and the first to be reconstructed by any geologist ever. Let's talk about, I think, my next step, which is dinosaurs. Right? So dinosaurs, first in a braided river in a system what is now northern Zimbabwe. So let me show you Zimbabwe is located here. Now Zimbabwe is on the northern eastern border of South Africa, and it also borders Botswana. But in that area where Zimbabwe is, 230 million years ago, a distant ancestral cousin of the giant long-necked theropod dinosaurs roamed. Bones of this dinosaur, called the Mbayosaurus rathi, have been unveiled as the oldest definitive dinosaur fossils in Africa, right? So now we know that the oldest dinosaurs, which lived before man, which I know is one of my other key trigger points for you guys, you're gonna have to understand that dinosaurs and man never roamed the earth together. So did dinosaurs and man ever roam the earth together? That's a no. Right? So all our movies that have dinosaurs and men running together, that was geographically, that was chronologically absolutely an impossibility. So I think one of the key things in understanding that is as we go down this historical train in terms of understanding where our lineage is and the origin of man, I think to put in context where we are in terms of that evolutionary train really matters. So the Earth is 4.5 million years ago. Pangea, which I went through the explanation, is about 200 million years ago. The first form of dinosaur was around 230 million years ago, but the dinosaurs we know were 65 million years ago. And then the first man was 2.5 million years. So dinosaurs, 65 million years, man, 2.5 million years ago. Not the same. Never hung out together, never roamed the earth together, but it's nice on TV as scientific drama. But anyway, I digress. So I think I say that to move to our next point. So man, again, has been around 2.5 million years. Let's talk about the form of man. So what at least information that's been shared, at least with me, and at least information that I've governed and researched out in reference to the first form of human that has evolved into our current being was on November 24th in 1974, where fossils of one of the oldest known human ancestors, Australopithecus afarensis specimen, nicknamed Lucy. You guys remember that when they was all over the news that they had found Lucy, where Lucy was discovered in a city called Hadar, Ethiopia. Now, Ethiopia is located on the eastern border, the horn of the continent of Africa. Ethiopia, Hadar is there. So that is the first, at least, fossilized form of our human ancestors that was discovered. The find revealed that our forebears underwent a previously unknown stage of evolution more than 1 million years before Lucy. So Lucy was still on all fours, basically, most closely resembling probably a monkey or an ape. And before her, that whatever form that was 1 million years before her is still unknown. So again, the find reveals that our forebears underwent a previously unknown stage of evolution more than 1 million years before Lucy and the iconic earlier human ancestor specimen that walked the earth 3.2 million years ago. So Lucy was about 3.2 million years ago, and she was still on all fours. So man, the earliest form of man that started to walk upright or closer to upright, began about 2.5 million years ago, called Homo habilis. Now, Homo habilis probably began to start using tools around that time, and we believe that men started to move from all fours to bipedal or to 2 feet in order to free up their hands to do more things with, to farm with, to use tools with, to do other things in order to advance their villages. Then Homo erectus, right, is 1.8 million years ago. Then it's Homo sapien, which is 200,000 years ago. So 200,000 years ago are closer, more resemblance to what we are. But I think more, or I don't think, according to information, our current genetic species is closer to 100,000 years ago, right? Well, I guess the question then remains then, where did that man who lived 100,000 years ago that closely resembles us reside on the continent? And that is the question I want to discuss and answer today. So, information points toward this continent here, which I want to discuss its name, Africa, right? Which Africa is actually not the true name of that continent, but was given to them by Louis Africanus, which was a Roman invader around 300 BC. But Africa, I also want to say to those who tell sometimes, when they tell African Americans, go back to Africa. Africa is actually a continent. I'm sure we know that, but it's 54 countries in that continent, right? And just a couple sidebars. So, Africa has been colonized by almost every European country known to man for their minerals. But almost every African country currently has won their freedom since 1970 and then 1994 South Africa with Nelson Mandela. But the only country that has never been colonized in Africa is Ethiopia. And just another sidebar. So, which I'll talk about later when I get to reparations and slavery in another series. But Liberia is the only country that was created for African Americans who were brought back from the United States back to Africa in about the early 1800s, right? So they had ships that actually, once they started to think and talk about abolishing slavery, they actually shipped some African Americans back to Africa, and Liberia was the country that they created to put the African Americans there. So a little tidbit of information. But let's get back to Africa's true name, right? So luckily in this book, Black History, they start off by giving a definitive information, which I feel for me like really clarifies historically how information is either lost purposely or through trade or through I don't know, just people don't have a great way of succession planning. But nonetheless, I love how these historians were able to go back and trace some of the early information, which puts in context why Africa is such a valuable continent to the entire world. So Africa, true name is Alkebulan. And Alkebulan means mother of mankind or Garden of Eden. Now, the term Africa was given to Africa by, again, Louis Africanus. So if we look, imagine, let's go over to this map. So, and I'll use the cane to point. So, this is the Mediterranean Sea that's in the northern part of North Africa. So, Tunisia, which is a country in northern Africa, has a city called Carthage. And Louis Africanus actually attacked Carthage, which the leader or general there was Hannibal. Remember Hannibal? Hannibal was actually an African out of Carthage in Tunisia. So Scipio or Louis Africanus attacked Carthage in Tunisia, defeated Hannibal there, and then he felt he had conquered the entire continent, so he named it Africanus. But Afri means kind of land or terry. It's a name that they gave just as a surname. But records have Africa's true name as Alkebulan, mother of mankind or Garden of Eden. So I think when we look historically back on how history and the origin of man is discovered and told, I think it's important, as it says in the Ashanti saying, there's nothing wrong with going back to fetch what we feel has been lost, right? What is it? So Finan, Wosan, Yankee, right? Wed, right? Wed, Finan, Wosan, Kofi Yankee, right? There's nothing wrong with going back and fetching our history, which we find we've lost or we've missed. And collectively, if we understand that, then I think it allows us then to put things in perspective that we value more importantly than our skin color, like our culture, right? Like geographically where we come from, how we built societies around our relationships, not our skin color, which varies, right? And based upon scientists, if life began here, which is I wanted to also share, right? Which is very clear, right? From all the anthropologists, all the archaeologists, all the geologists, all say life began in Africa. And the declaration from the information is started in Botswana, right? So to be clear, in the Bible, it refers to Africa as Kush, right? Or East Yeah, it refers to Kush or Kushtik, but the true name, the indigenous name, is Alkebulan. But if you look also here on the chart, it says in the Bible that the Garden of Eden is located in Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia, and this is the Red Sea right here that separates Saudi Arabia and Africa, right? The Arabic nation in Africa, which is why the Arabic has such a heavy influence on that Eastern African and the northern area. They invaded, and of course, the Mediterranean Sea, where you have, the Italians, and you have the Greeks, and you have the Ottomans or Turkish and the Moors that all invaded the northern part of Africa, right? There's a current Sahara Desert here right now. So another tablet of information, about 5,000 years ago, it wasn't a desert. It was a lush green land, and people traversed and traded through there all the time. This is how this is why I'm telling you this, my global citizens, is that when life began here and they migrated north and the continent and the land masses were together, they were able to go to each of these individual land masses. That means life originated here, and the majority people, almost all the people, were dark skinned. All of them. For 100,000 years, right? From 100,000 years, when first genetically, man that looks like us, originated in Botswana, migrated north, they were all dark skinned. The landmass Pangaea was located around the equator, which is one of the hottest points on Earth, right? So, and again, my first supposition when I entered into the conversation or the dialogue was that or to my monologue rather, is that scientists have proven that as you move further north and the sun has less effect on your body and you are depleted of vitamin D, you have a lightening of your skin color. So everyone emanated from a darker skinned human being to a lighter skinned human being. And that's just geographic. That's just environmental. So that has nothing to do culturally with how we develop. Of course, the geographic land masses has an effect as we, develop. But for us, in terms of our ability to coexist and to live societal, and our intelligence can't be governed by our skin color. And if so, first man, we're African Americans. So let's, in conclusion, let's review over what I feel kind of are the key points. One, all life started on this continent we call Africa, that we now know is the first indigenous name to the continent was Alkebulan, mother of mankind, Garden of Eden, which is no longer thought about being in Mesopotamia, which is Iran, in Saudi Arabia, because if all life began here, then first man had to be there. So that can't be true, right? Sorry, my white global citizen folk. There were no white people on the planet until 40,000 years ago. And remember, man had been around 200,000 years. Man that looks similar to us had been around 100,000 years. So not until 40,000 years did white people begin to exist at all. So for us to focus anything on color is absolutely ridiculous. 3, migrating north allowed us to expand over the continent. And what I believe, and what we believe, is what caused the Pangaea or the continents to separate is that under the earth there's tectonic plates, and that over a time, I think a series of huge earthquakes caused the landmass to break up. So California, you may end up in the ocean, or wherever there are fault lines all over many of the continents here. So again, my premise and declaration, my woke folk, my global citizens, my GCs, is that colorism is dead. And so hopefully through what I've explained gives you some level of indication that that colorism shouldn't matter to us. We shouldn't deem ourselves white or black or brown. I think inherent in that is division. I think we need to extract that from any of our governmental documentation, for any reference that we have to each other, and let's focus on our culture. We can be geographically different. We can have social, political, and economic differences, right? But it shouldn't be predicated upon whether your tone, your skin tone matters at all. To me, it makes absolutely no sense. To me, based on the information that I showed you, the origin of man begins in one central location, and all of us came from one single source. So let's focus on our attributes, things that help to enhance who we are. This is why I'm calling you guys who follow me global citizens. So thank you, global citizens. Stay tuned for my next series, which I'm going to talk about the transatlantic slave trade, how African Americans got to America, and why we deserve reparations. Let's go. Stay woke. As I always say, be informed, not influenced. Stay woke. Thank you, my global citizens. Thank you, my GCs. Let's get it. Thank you, my global citizens. Please, please, please stay informed.